The second episode of The One-Man Trekker will begin momentarily.
Hey, these folks had to wait long enough for this second episode. You think we could cut it out with the BS?
And now, in the private recesses of his dark, secluded basement, it's a purveyor of wonder, imagination, and the grandest science fiction franchise of the 20th and 21st centuries, Kert, the One-Man Trekker.
Boy, that was a mouthful.
You bet I'm tired. I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives. I'm tired of deciding which mission is too risky and which isn't, and who's going on the landing party and who doesn't, and who lives and who dies.
Are the transporters beaming up yet?
Not 100%, Captain.
Oh, I know Hamlet, and what he might say with irony, I say with conviction. What a piece of work is man.
Have I ever mentioned you play a very irritating game of chess, Mr. Spock?
Irritating. Ah, yes. One of your earth emotions.
Remind me to tell you that I'm sick and tired of your logic.
That is the most illogical attitude.
Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits.
No bloody A, B, C, or D.
What am I, a doctor or a moon shuttle conductor?
Well, you know, I finally got the last word.
All right, with much pomp and fanfare, I have to welcome everybody to this second episode of the One-Man Trekker! Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. It's been 5 months since I released the first episode. And as you're listening to this, you're shaking your head going, what? Because, I mean, if you're going to put up a podcast, if you're going to start a podcast, right, you don't wait 5 months to do the second episode. But that's what happened to me, and of course you're asking yourself, how would a guy like me take 5 months to do the second episode of his podcast? I mean, for crying out loud, he's got all the time in the world, right? As I said in the first episode of this, it's my employment in life to watch Star Trek, and that's what this podcast is going to be about, is me journeying through Star Trek. But of course, if there's no second episode, that's not much of a journey, is it? That's not much of a trek. And excuse me. And I mean, if I'm sitting around watching Star Trek all the time, and that is my life, you wouldn't think that would keep me busy enough to, keep me away from podcasting duties, but I guess it did. So it just goes to show you how, man, time flies. I gotta tell you, it's just be thankful. It's still January. But I'm just gonna be honest with you here as we roll into this second episode. I really shouldn't be admitting this on the air, but it's actually quite amazing that I've made it 1 minute and 30 seconds into this, because I'll tell you what happened. I sort of have an odd psychology going. I would make a good case for a psychotherapist. Let me tell you. First episode of this, I pulled up Audacity and just started recording and sharing my thoughts about where I was in the world of Star Trek at that time. And after I put up that first initial episode, which was, nothing was pre-planned or thought out at all. I just, after listening to one of my favorite Star Trek podcasts, This Week in Trek, I just felt like, you know what, I want to do a podcast of my own. So that's how that happened, and I explained all that in the last episode, which will probably end up being better than this one, because here's what happened. I started, and this was July of 2012. I started thinking about the second episode, and there's still, as I've resurrected the idea of doing this podcast, returning to it, I still want to carry on the same ideas that I was planning for that second episode. But that was exactly it. I was planning for a second episode, whereas I didn't plan for the first, and that's why it happened in the first place. There wasn't any preparation to be considered real intensely. But I was really working hard for a week or so after the days after I put out that first episode. I was working hard for the second one, coming up with many ideas with how to do things, different segments and such. And I still want to save, as I said, or as I was beginning to say, or I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. My brain's really just not functioning well, and I apologize for that. But I do want to save some things for the third episode, the next episode after this one. If I can cross my fingers and hope to get to it. Because there is something pretty exciting that's going to happen, I haven't been on the air for 5 months, and there's something that's been under construction during the time in between my hiatus, I suppose. Who takes a hiatus after episode 1, but something big is under construction. I'm extremely excited to share it with all of you, and that's going to be in the next one. But for the time being, what happened is, planning for the second episode, I actually got anxious about it. I actually got nervous about it. Instead of just pulling up Audacity and naturally rambling and all the thoughts are coming out and everything's natural and flowing great, I was getting anxious about it, nervous about it, and my perfectionist brain just went insane. And I came up with a quote of mine the other day. If George Lucas were as much a perfectionist as I, he would have never made Star Wars. So I have some functioning problems. I don't function very well sometimes, psychologically and emotionally. I'm a real sentimental human being, which is why Star Trek means so much to me. And I suppose I'll get into what kind of Star Trek I'm watching today, as I did in the last one. But I think I still need to explain myself. Lucy, you've got some explaining to do. Only my name isn't Lucy. It's Kert Kaczynski. I don't know how many times I've introduced myself thus far in this recording. But episode 2, I kept delaying it for a couple weeks, and eventually it just fell from my abilities to accomplish. And so it's 5 months later, and I was sort of thinking, man, what a shame, because I made this beautiful, after making the recording, I put together a beautiful logo for this podcast. At least I think it's great. I think it's a great logo, one of the best graphics I've made. And you got to dig the picture of me too. I wasn't lying about me having Kirk's hair, but it's just I needed to put out some more stuff. So as I was thinking about it, let's see, I think earlier this year is when I started thinking about it, in January, and I was thinking about how this really would have been a great thing that you were starting out here. You need to continue doing this. And so I sort of thought to myself, well, you just sort of let the one-man trekker sit there. Maybe you should do something else. So then I concocted the idea of doing a podcast that would cover something beyond just the world of Star Trek, because there are numerous interests, science fiction interests that I have, such as, I'm just going to go off on a list here, Star Wars. That was what kicked it off, when I saw that first as a child. That's when I sort of knew how I was going to see everything, and then there's other films. The Black Hole is an old film from 1978, a science fiction classic that definitely needs a lot more recognition. Great movie. 2001: A Space Odyssey, Doctor Who, Lost in Space. Used to watch Lost in Space every day as a kid. I didn't have Star Trek back then, though I loved it just as much as I do now. Only difference is I see a lot more Star Trek now, because thanks to the library. And I only own one season of Star Trek on the DVD. But I thought about doing a podcast all about my world of science fiction. And I could just do whatever I wanted, and I was going to create a logo where I was in a tuxedo and I was in front of Saturn, and, that's the classic science fiction icon, is, something with Saturn in it. Back in the days when the Science Fiction Channel was cool, had that. So I was going to do that, and basically what I was going to do is I was going through TOS Season 3 at the time, and this was only a few weeks ago, only a few days ago, really. And TOS Season 3, by the way, is not as bad as I've been hearing, from listening to This Week in Trek. But, it's all just a matter of opinion, of course, but I was really expecting some worse episodes. But I have not watched an episode of Star Trek that I've truly been upset with in a long time, which is a good thing. Mainly in TOS Season 3, because there was one episode of TNG I watched recently, which I'll get into that, of course, but let me just explore that in a second. Gosh, I'm all over the place. I'm a total mess, folks. You'll have to excuse me. So an idea I had was, going through